because your business will never grow like bigger than the owner's development.
Karolina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Me too. This is really cool because you're actually like a best-selling author, which I think I've never had a best-selling author on the podcast before, but I also think like a lot of people say they're best-selling authors, even though they might not necessarily be. So I'm really excited to talk to you, and your book is pretty incredible, changing lives. I would love to dive into how that process started. Like, why did you write the book? How did you decide to write the book?
Yeah. So the process of writing the book was really similar to the business I started around it as well. And just to go back a little bit, I was an ambitious little girl. I always wanted to be a writer. Like I always wanted to write books when I was little. And it was really cute. I would write little poems and short stories and plays when I was little. And as I grew up, especially as I went to college, I started drinking and, kind of partying and stuff. But what also happened is I got kind of confronted with reality and just this idea that you're supposed to get a job and, pay the bills, that I long ago gave up on those writing dreams. And, I continued to, drink alcohol, and I was, not by any means what you would call an alcoholic, but I was definitely not working on my dreams at the same time. I was working a normal 9-to-5 job back then, and I would drink every weekend and just kind of find myself in this continual loop of, get through the week and then go out with your friends on the weekend. And I long ago forgot those dreams that the little girl had of writing a book, and I was just kind of going through the motions and just kind of doing what seemed like everyone else was doing.
Yeah, and it was like school does that to you. Like I don't know because I feel like I had similar experiences in college, and I felt very much throughout like every phase of schooling, even through high school and middle school, they're encouraging you to not pursue like a full-time author career. Like that's really something that they try to steer you away from. Like I, at one point, considered a creative writing major, and I was literally turned away. They literally were like, no, this is not what you want. And I'm like, you're that department head. Like, why are you convincing me not to change majors? And it's really interesting to me that that's not discussed as like a path. And then you're right, once you get as a senior in college, everyone around you is, like looking for jobs, looking for regular 9-to-5 stuff. And I personally did not have a lot of support from my family either to pursue something not in the traditional 9-to-5 space, which is interesting because my brother's an entrepreneur. So like, I don't know why they thought that something different would be better for me. But I totally get what you mean. And I think it's important to note that like, I think a lot of people experience being told to not pursue that route.
Yeah. And it's like, I basically gave up on those like little girls' dreams and kind of just followed suit with the herd and what everyone else was doing. And it was really easy to do that because I think, as I was using alcohol as a way to, again, relax and wine, go out with my friends. There was nothing really odd about it, but it was also like something that was numbing me to my dreams. And so it wasn't until I actually took a break from alcohol that I started to really reawaken back to those dreams. And it first started as like a little 30-day break with Dry January back in 2018. And I just felt so much better. My energy was coming back. My sleep was so much better. My mood was like more elevated. I was a lot happier. And I drank a few times in February of that year, and I hated it. I actually hated like the lack of sleep. I hated how just like groggy I felt the next day, and I hated how it dipped my mood. And I decided to take another break at that point. And basically I've been alcohol free since for the last six and a half years, essentially. And what happened that year is like all of these things I think I couldn't do. Like I never thought I could be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think I could do it, or I didn't think there was money in it, right? Like kind of being steered away from that kind of stuff. Like by ditching alcohol, I was just like, well, I did that and I never thought I could do that. So why couldn't I do all those things? And it kind of elevated my self-belief in myself, especially I wasn't letting myself down. I wasn't breaking promises to myself. I was really taking care of myself. My confidence, my self-esteem, my self-worth went up so much. And that year was just the year of like, why couldn't I do anything? And I started to kind of topple back not only all the beliefs I had about alcohol and that you needed to have fun, but also all these self-imposed limits that I had put on myself. So I decided to launch a business, and I started writing the first draft of this book back then. And I just started to be so actively engaged and hopeful in this new future I was creating for myself. And I took baby step and sometimes leaps and leaps and leaps. And it wasn't too long before I followed the process and I was able to leave my day job. I published this both with HarperCollins. I was able to retire my husband 2 years ago, and now we travel the world and have a multiple six-figure company and get to help so many people. And so I'm just so glad about that little girl inside of me that I kept contact with, because she knew that there was more for me. But I think reality, society, a lot of our global beliefs, and alcohol or any other unhealthy coping mechanisms really kind of push us down and tell us like, no, your dreams aren't possible, and just, do what everyone else is doing, basically.
No, I have this theory that your dream job as a kid is like what you're meant to be doing as an adult. Like your younger self is just able to essentially like tap into that future version of you, and they're like guiding you to be like, no, this is where your most fulfilling and like exciting adult version of you lives. So I want to kind of drill deep down, because I think there's so much to unpack here that's really important. I want to talk a little bit about like emotional numbing and like the coping mechanism, especially around alcohol, because I relate a lot to what you're saying. Like in the recent years, especially as I've focused on like the podcast, my health, and like my tech ventures, like I truly have a desire to drink less and less. And I notice a lot with people who drink heavily, they are using it to numb their true emotions that they really don't want to deal with. And like, it's really awkward to talk about that. Like, I can't just say that to their face because it makes people very uncomfortable. But I think that's like my friends and I, we talk a lot about like emotional numbing and things like that. So I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really like brilliant to recognize that we kind of grow up in a society that venerates that, like, especially with alcohol, we grow up as kids, we watch adults drink, and we think it's the code to adulthood. We think it's the code to sophistication. I grew up with Sex in the City, like a Cosmo on the City was like the highlight of, a woman's life. We grow up with this idea that it gives you belonging and, acceptance with other people. So it's like, for the most part, we have all these beliefs and all of these kind of assumptions that are put on alcohol as a context instead of just like thinking of it as a beverage. And essentially it is numbing, right?
It's like
exactly
to drink. Like I think about the people I follow on Instagram and like their idea of, I think about like what we're seeing today now, especially for younger generations, like the influencers that they are looking up to are going out with their friends on the weekend. Like, I've always had this association with like a dirty martini, that like a beautiful girl in this black dress is like at the bar drinking a dirty martini. I tried one for myself, thought it was vile, like literally could not drink it, but like, that's me. But it's true. Like we do have this association with alcohol and like socialization and elevating your appearance and like a persona almost around it.
Yeah. And so it's like no one's fault really when you find yourself in a relationship with alcohol or as a habit. But essentially what it does is it's numbing. Alcohol is a depressant. It disconnects you from your prefrontal cortex and it numbs your emotions. It also stimulates stress hormones in your body. So you actually release more cortisol, adrenaline, and dynorphin after you drink, which actually means that your baseline happiness gets lower as a drinker. So like you're not feeling like yourself. You feel lower, more anxious. And alcohol also depletes your ability to feel dopamine naturally, and it lowers your serotonin and GABA. So not only are you numbing and pushing away emotions that you're meant to deal with, you're also kind of changing the neurochemistry of your brain to be a lot more negative and prone to anxiety. So as a drinker, I didn't really think my dreams were possible. I was just trying to get through. And I wasn't sad. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't depressed. I was still a very positive person. But I think that, really thinking bigger and really going for things that were like a stretch just seemed like unfeasible for me back then. And I think when we use alcohol to numb, my biggest thing that I was numbing was actually boredom. I wasn't like overly stressed with my previous career and job. I was restless and bored. I think that I was put on this planet, like you said, to do some of the dreams my childhood self had, which for me was not only just writing, but also teaching and also making an impact, and psychology. I was always interested in that. But I think in my mind, when you're a kid, you think of it as these little boxes. Like, well, if I like to teach, that I'm supposed to be a teacher. But I didn't want to be a teacher, right? I didn't want to go into the high schools or the middle schools. And now it's so uncanny how my career literally has elements of all those things as an online coach and author. I couldn't have imagined that because it basically didn't even exist back then. That feeling of boredom that I got was really what kind of propelled me not only to keep drinking, so it was like, this was fun, those winery tastings or the brewery tour or like things that seemed so sophisticated that I didn't realize how unfulfilled I was throughout the week. And it's like when I finally removed the alcohol, I really had to grapple with that boredom. And I think that boredom is actually really magical. They say that the greatest inventors and innovators felt very bored before they challenged themselves to find this new innovation. And I think that's the feelings we need to learn to sit with is like, if you're struggling with creativity or ideas, maybe you want to be an entrepreneur or write a book, but you're just like, I don't know what. Maybe you're not allowing yourself to actually sit with your emotions long enough to therefore know what to do next and have your intuitive guidance like lead you in the next spot. And I'll tell you, it was so much easier to open a bottle of wine than write the next great American novel.
No, totally. Like I think my vice is like social media. Every single time I'm in the process of doing something mentally stimulating or challenging, and anytime I hit that point where I'm like, I don't know how to get past this block, my instinct is to be like, oh, I'll just take a quick social media break. And then you start scrolling and then you forget what you were doing in the first place. And you end up like, steering away from that or jumping to a different train of thought or these kinds of things. And like alcohol is the same. You're like, oh, I just need my little creative juice, my thinking juice. And people will pour themselves a glass of wine. And then similarly, like you get sidetracked or you get lost or you like start to feel tipsy and buzzed. And it's like that is taking away from the goal.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we also have to feel some negative emotions. Like we have to feel like, say you want to be an entrepreneur and you are, feeling stressed from your 9 to 5. You have to feel that. You have to actually have a motivator and a push in the next direction because you could numb it forever and never even know what you really want. So I think our emotions help teach us what we want, what we don't want, what's aligned, what's misaligned. And for the most part, we are taught as a society to numb them, distract them, mull over them. So I think it's something really cool that happens when you remove alcohol or any one of those distractors, but especially alcohol. You are going to go on a self-discovery journey so big. I mean, just even the question of like, what is fun for you? If you've been like groomed to believe that like drinking is fun and that's the main source of fun, like, boy, do you have a lot to discover and explore because you have to figure that question out. And trust me, it's not found in a glass. Like there's this beautiful world out there that we all have at our fingertips, and finding your own sense of organic joy or fun or something that stimulates you or challenges you is a really beautiful self-discovery journey. And sometimes those emotions are also negative and need to be healed. Maybe we've been pushing down something that for a really long time, it's coming up for a reason, because healing that is that next step to the next level for yourself. But we wouldn't know that if we're pushing it down.
100%. Like, I will be brutally honest right now. I have interacted with so many people who are unhealed and like deeply unfulfilled and unhappy as a result and those people tend to be the ones that I see partying on a regular basis. And I find it challenging to surround myself with those kinds of people because I think like when you've done a lot of inner work, you have a deeper sense of fulfillment through yourself. Like, and it's not even tying yourself to accomplishments. You're not like, oh, I'm more fulfilled because I do X, Y, and Z. It's more like you have healed the parts of yourself that you were previously trying to numb. And it then allows you to see that behavior in other people much more clearly. Yeah. And it's not your job to fix other people. Like, they have to be willing to do that work themselves. So then to be surrounded by that, and like, especially if they're not close friends that you feel like you can't have an honest conversation with, it's very difficult because you're just like, I just want to be like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to do that. You can actually take a step back and sit with those emotions, but it does make people so uncomfortable that they turn and run the other way at the first sign of like, ooh, this is an icky emotion.
Yeah. And, I love to teach and help women with purpose as well. So I help women not only ditch alcohol, but find deeper purpose. And that big question, like, what do you want, is only going to come through if you're willing to sit through that and to like actually allow your intuition to speak to you and learn how to sit with yourself and those emotions that we're talking about. It's like the greatest answers and epiphanies and synchronicities and messages are going to come from that space. So it's like, if we can learn to like welcome it more and see it as like, there's going to be answers here for me, I think it'd be a lot more of a comfortable journey.
Yeah, oh God, I'm so excited that we're talking about this because I feel like it's such a rarity to be able to discuss this kind of thing openly, because I think a lot of people, anytime, like, for example, there's no way that I could have these conversations at like the dinner table with my family because they're very uncomfortable with these kinds of emotions and they don't know how to deal with them. And to be able to discuss it openly is so refreshing. And I would love to drill deeper into the kind of exercises that you take these women through. Like, how do you get them to think about their purpose? How do you get them to be open and listening to their intuition in themselves?
Yeah. So in my work, usually women come and take a break from alcohol first. And I promise you, like, doing that one step is the key to like so much unlocked intuition, creativity, confidence, courage that comes up. But let's say we've already done that, or we're doing something similar in another healing journey. What I think is really critical to recognize is a lot of times our idea of what we're supposed to do in life is really married to money. So it's like, I really wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think there was money in writing. Like, I didn't actually see how you could make a career out of it. So I shut that off as an option a long time ago.
Right.
And so if I was thinking like, I really want to write a book, but then I'm already starting to figure out, well, yeah, but how would I get money from that? How is it going to pay my bills? Blah, blah, blah. I'm shutting the door off to like my true passion by trying to figure out the like money piece. Now, right. I'm not against money. I want everyone to make lots and lots of money off their passion, but it's not a good first question because what happens is the logical, reasonable part of our brain takes over. And this is who's been running the show this whole time. And it's been also informed so much about what society thinks you should do and what society deems as respectable or proper or whatever. It's why so many people are bored in careers that are sucking the life out of them, right? Mm-hmm. So I love the question, actually, if you won $40 million in the lottery, and let's say, you traveled around for a bit, you went on some beautiful beaches, like you really relaxed. But once you're done with that phase, you're ready to like have meaningful work. You actually want to do something that would contribute to the world, make a difference, like something that you really want to put your stamp onto the world. Now, money is no concern. You're set for life. You don't have to make money. What would you do? And that gets people's brains thinking in a different way oftentimes because they're not as attached to the reasonable practical. They're really digging deep into like what's enjoyable, how do I want to make a legacy? And I use these questions as clues. So maybe not every single thing you think of with that question is the one right answer, but I keep asking these questions as clues. For example, like, what you already talked about, what did you love as a child? And or what causes did you care about as a child? Because oftentimes I think that sense of contribution and how we want to give back to the world is somehow interrelated to the things we cared about as causes when we were younger. So for example, I really cared about women's empowerment. Now, I'm not like working in a bureaucracy to try to change laws against discrimination or anything, but I do really see the through line of how working with women to not only ditch alcohol, but also step into their purpose and become super empowered as entrepreneurs is still women's empowerment very much, right? So that was something I cared about ever since I was a little girl. Another really great way to think about it too is that like, what would you really regret not doing? If you want to think of the end of your life, you're 95 years old, you're looking back, like what are the things you'll regret not doing in this lifetime? And those are also really, really good clues. So I've had so many women tell me, and there's actually a statistic on this, that 84% of Americans want to write a book. And it's so fascinating because writing a book It's not like some magical genie needs to come and bless you. You know, you don't necessarily have to have connections. Like anyone could pick up the pen or their keyboard and start writing a book and go through the process. But most people don't do it. Like less than 1% of Americans will ever write a book. And so if like that's a goal that comes up from this line of questioning or something like that is a really good clue for you. And I remember that's what I heard right away when I took my break from alcohol back in 2018. I was hearing this like voice write a book, and I knew I, you know, always wanted to do that. But it was so interesting as I got more into it, I realized, oh, if I want to have a successful nonfiction book, I also need to have a business to it too. And so I started learning more about the business arm and coaching and all that kind of stuff. So it's like one dream begot the other dream. And like my less mature brain at that point wouldn't have understood how everything kind of connects together the way I do today. But I was willing to listen to the signs and follow like one step forward. So it's like, I don't think you could ever really imagine what your career is going to look like 5 years before because you don't have the capacity. And it's almost like that question when you like ask people, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, how do they even, they can't even imagine that. What they can do the best at is like the themes and like the energy and the feeling of what they want to do. But like most of what you and me and so many people right now are doing wasn't even a possibility 10 to 15 to 20 years ago. So how is the younger version of us ever supposed to know that? And they say the same thing is going to be true in 20 years. Most careers are going to be unrecognizable, you know? So it's like, instead of figuring out the how, it's like more of like the feelings and like some of the things that we really want to do to make a contribution to this planet.
100%. I tell this to all of my friends anytime that they're at a crossroads, like like, how can I explain this? The future is so fluid, right? Like it's always changing. And the best case scenario that I could ever want for myself is to be in a situation that's better than I could have imagined it. So like if I have a dream where, this podcast is for aspiring entrepreneurs because I am one, like I want to be an entrepreneur. That's my dream. I don't necessarily know how that's going to play out. Like I don't know whether that's going to, what that looks like necessarily exactly. And so when I started to think about how I was going to make this dream a reality, I started to focus on what is exciting to me. Like, what do I enjoy doing? What could I, like you said, like if money wasn't an option, what would I do for fun? What would I do that I didn't have to get paid for? And for me, like it had some sort of social element to it. I think that's inevitably, it was what led me to the podcast. And then it's so funny because I just kept doing the podcast and I was just like following the, like you said, like the signs, which I like to call as like proof from the universe that things are working, right? Like you get, like, for example, for me, I got like lots of traction. I had guests all the time. Like I've never had to hunt for content, which is rare, I think, for other people that I've talked to for podcasting. So like those little breadcrumbs were signs to me that things were working out and that I should continue on this path. And then one episode that I was talking about, my friend watched it and he realized and he heard what I was saying as like, we have really similar goals. And that caused him to reach out to me to be like, I really want you to become the co-founder of this tech platform because you and I have the same goals. So like my entrepreneurial journey is getting me there. But back when I started, I was like, I don't have a product idea. I don't have a service that I'm selling people. Like I'm not a coach or a consultant per se. Like I think the hard thing for people when they're going down this path is they're like, you're right, like they don't have a neat little box to put their dreams in, to label and then to go forth with. And there's a lot of surrenderance that has to occur to allow people to like take one step at a time that is based on feeling. You're following your excitement and your passion, which is uncomfortable because like you said, your brain's been in charge for so long. And without that logical next step, it's hard to make the first step. And it's not like, I'm not saying don't have a plan or like don't have a business plan or like don't have a business model, but like in order to get to those first few steps, it's all based on like what is exciting to you.
Yeah. And I think that's like really makes the point too, is like if you're getting this message or this sign or this intuitive gut pull that you're supposed to launch a podcast, but you're over here in your brain being like, yeah, but how's that going to make money? And how am I ever going to do this with it? Blah, 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 blah. you'll never do it. And maybe
Totally.
you needed to launch that podcast to meet that friend that's going to have that opportunity, or your whatever it is, you know?
Exactly.
So it's like, I really do believe it doesn't mean necessarily if you want to write a book, you're meant to be the next like J.K. Rowling. Could be, right? But
Right.
you have that pull for a reason, and the universe is trying to guide you into the next best opportunity for you. That's why we have, I think our desires are the most like sacred thing that we could ever have. And I think we're taught to not listen to them because they're selfish. But that's not true. They're the most selfless thing we could ever do, because when we go after a dream, we are showing other women, other people that, you know, you can do that and that they have permission to do that as well. You know, even people who go out and travel the world, maybe you're like, well, how does that really help the world? Well, someone's over there looking at them being like, whoa, look at that woman. She quit her job. She's traveling the world. I didn't know you could do that. And she gets inspired to do that too. And it creates these ripple effects where we're kind of giving ourselves permissions to actually do what we want instead of what we think we should do, you know? And it's like, you can't think your way into this. Like, it really is that, you know, having faith that you're following the signs, and just you not knowing, you're not sure how it's all going to end up. You know, right now, I run a certification program. It's a 5X certification program. I certify coaches in it. 6 years ago, like, I would have never guessed that that's where like my business would land, you know, and I do all the other kinds of things and host retreats and stuff like that, but I would have had no clue. And, you know, even my book, like, I've made money off of it, but it's not like most of my money comes from the business, right? I would have never known that if I was just like, how do I make money from writing and stuff like that? So I really believe there's a quote by Goethe that like, you take the first leap, you take action, and the universe really will follow and catch you. You know what I mean? And you have no idea how it's all going to pan out. So that's why, like, we have to really trust those inner voices. They're so wise and important, and not try to like figure out every detail and micromanage it.
Totally. I think this is really interesting, and I definitely want to talk about how you went from book to business, because I think that's a key lesson. But one thing that I do want to add before we jump to that is that it's like you said, you can't micromanage. The best way that I can give an example into how this works from like a universal perspective is thinking about, like, let's say your goal is you want to have lots of money. Like, you want to have lots of money. And I think most people would say, I want to win the lottery, right? Because that's in their mind the easiest way to get cash. But from the universal perspective, what you're doing is you're then narrowing the scope from which you're able to make a lot of money. Like, perhaps what was, you know, instead of allowing a multitude of options, right? Because the universe has a million options that I can provide to you. You maybe a long lost relative passes away and leaves you a crazy inheritance. Maybe you know, who knows what other methodologies are out there that you could have come across a lot of money. But if you're just saying, I want to win the lottery, you're closing off possibilities to other avenues to get your goal. So it's like, it's better to be open-ended, to be mindful and listen, as opposed to micromanaging the outcomes.
Yeah. And I'd way rather bet on myself and my skills and my talent than like a random lottery picking.
Totally. And I think that's the perfect segue, because you somehow, I don't know how you do this, because you really blew my mind a second ago when you were like, oh, I did the book. And then I was like, I should make a business for my book. Like, why did I not think of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was like, again, that like original thread of a dream. And so I started like kind of getting into this world and just like learning about how like nonprofit authors, like, you know, really grow a platform and stuff. And I really did see like, okay, like I need to grow an audience and have like customers and have like a movement behind this so that the book is therefore supported. So what ended up happening is I was writing my book like first drafts as I was building my business, and they kind of grew in tandem. And because I was traditionally published, I have a traditional book deal from HarperCollins. You don't just put out a book like overnight. It's a really long process. So like I started in 2018, but the book didn't actually come out until 2022. So by the time the book comes out, I've built a pretty sizable good business. I have an audience to sell to. And, you know, it just like really then took off as well. So then it grew my business even more, you know, and it just kind of like layers and cascades. And it's so beautiful how it did that. And I have so many people who reach out to me and say they read the book and, you know, now they want to join a program or get certified or do something like that, which is really cool. And then vice versa, you know, the people who hear about me on podcasts or on Instagram, you know, they might be interested in buying the book. And so again, that was like one of those ways where just the universe worked the way it was supposed to work without me having to know all the answers up front. But I always had that seed, that desire that I meant to write a book. And it was actually really sad. I remember before I stopped drinking, the last Christmas before I stopped drinking, I was talking to my sister-in-law, and we don't really get along too well. So it's kind of odd that I was telling her this, but she was just saying like, what would you want to do before you die? Like one thing you want to do. And I was like almost like begging, almost beseeching. I was like, if I could just write a book, I would be so fulfilled. And I remember I was like almost begging the universe because I was completely given up that that was possible for me. I had like no belief at all because basically, you know, when I started drinking, I got the worst writer's block ever. So I still had this goal of wanting to write a book, but I would try to write every year. I would have like a New Year's resolution where I'm supposed to write 30 minutes every week. And I would do it like the first week of January and then totally drop it. And so every year I just kind of failed in a way and like proved to myself that I don't have it in me and all this kind of stuff. And I think that was so groundbreaking when I took that break from alcohol. All of a sudden my writing was back. All of a sudden, all of this creativity and intuition and ideas and emotions were flooding to the surface. And I was like, where was this the last 13 years? It was completely gone. And that's why I'm so passionate about not only helping people ditch alcohol and find their deeper purpose, but really like go on this journey to unearth what they're meant to do. Because sometimes we have to remove the block first and then we can kind of figure it out. So whether that's alcohol or whatever, you know, is just really relating to you at this moment, you have to kind of remove that to make the space to really know what you want. And so it's been amazing because this book has allowed me to meet so many people. You know, I got on TV shows when it first came out. So fun. I got to speak around the nation as well. And it's just actually like one piece of my business now. You know, there's all of these other pieces that I just, again, would have never been able to guess. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship, and I'm glad that we get to share that together because I think, you know, for the most part, we're kind of groomed into this idea of safety and security with like a traditional job and stuff. But like, I think there's nothing as rewarding as betting on yourself and just knowing that like, you know, a job can always let you go. The economy can change, all this kind of stuff. But like an entrepreneur still will face different like problems and issues, but you're always solving them. And you just become more and more valuable to the marketplace because of all those skills that you are able to offer. The more value you have to offer the world, the more money you can make from that, which is really incredible. And so for me, like I am my safest bet. You know, I even went 2 years ago when I was retiring my husband, we're like, okay, everything's on this business now. You know, there's no plan B. There's no other safety net here. Like this has to make it for us. And it was a really big leap back then because we, you know, I wasn't sure if it would work out and stuff. And it was the best thing we ever did. We took a 3-month trip to Europe together, finally able to travel the world. And it's just been so amazing ever since then. And we've inspired so many other women to just think differently about, you know, how you can take your passion and really use it to build a fulfilling career, which is so much more possible today, I think, than it was, you know, 50 years ago. Think about our moms, our grandmothers, like they didn't have this kind of ability, you know, and I think we owe it to ourselves to at least try. And they say too that 80% of all millionaires are entrepreneurs too. So if it's like we're talking about money, it actually is the faster, smarter way to make a legacy for yourself than the traditional route.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Like we're all such unique individuals that each of us would create something totally different. And when you do so for yourself, you open up. I think like the reason why a lot of people are attracted to entrepreneurialism is first and foremost freedom. It's freedom from schedules, it's freedom, it's time freedom, financial freedom, and fulfilling like soul freedom. And I think like a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I can't be an entrepreneur or something like that. Like, you know, there's too much competition in the market, or, you know, somebody's got to do the 9-to-5 jobs. Like I fully believe, and it's truly like my goal, the reason that I do this podcast is because I want to provide a platform that empowers people to see that they can be, that work can be different. Like it's part of the, it's, you know, part of the reason that I do this tech platform is we believe that work can be different, that with the rise of freelance now, especially, there is opportunity to do something different, to find a better solution that's more fulfilling and more financially intriguing for a lot of people. Like the idea that you get to work on something that you're passionate about that also pays you well is almost unfathomable today. And that's bananas to me. It's like that's just so counterintuitive. Life is supposed to be great, and it's supposed to be fun and beautiful and happy and fulfilling. And the way that our society is structured is based off of like, you got to pay your bills, you know? But both things are possible. They are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And there's just like so much burnout and stress in like so many jobs. Like they're not catered to like real breathing humans who need like holistic care and support and all this kind of stuff. And I think, we have that myth almost in our culture of the penniless artist. Like you can either be fulfilled but like completely broke, or you can be rich working on Wall Street selling out your soul, basically. And that's how I thought about it back when I was in my 20s. Like I remember getting an MBA, and a lot of my classmates went off to Wall Street, and I was like, I'm going to go to the nonprofit sector because I care about the world, you know what I mean? But it paid a lot less. But that was like really that dichotomy I was grappling with. I literally didn't believe you could actually make a lot of money doing what you love. Like that wasn't fathomable to me. And there's now so many examples of people, whether it's authors or people who are, service providers or people running businesses or just anyone who's passionate about what they do, who have made a lot of money doing it, that's really defying that, So I think we need to break up with that myth and say, if other people have been able to figure this out, I'm no different. I could too.
And let's take a nonprofit, for example. This is something that recently I came to the realization of that totally blew my mind. But nonprofits generate money. Like they pay their employees, like they still make some sort of an income. The only difference is that they are reinvesting it back into the business, right? Like, and then when you think about it that way, you're like, why does an entity have money? Like, why does an entity, a company, need to have money? In my mind, if you're running a business, like there is an opportunity to run it differently, where you're not technically for profit, you're nonprofit, but you're just reinvesting your money back into your employees. So thinking about it, like, why can't you have a business that as it scales and grows, so do your employees, and like so do their contributions should be reflected based off of their actual work. Like that, we're taught to think that those things are crazy, but it's really not.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see, like, from the pandemic and just like people really rethinking careers, I think we're going to see a lot of change. I think right now that change is people are jumping ship into entrepreneurship, Yeah. And I don't know if everyone can be an entrepreneur. Like I believe obviously everyone has the potential to be an entrepreneur, but I think what's really going to cause is kind of a change in the working world. Like something has to change, for sure. Yes. And we're going to recognize that and see that. And it's going to be a huge cultural shift one day. But for now, I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep building an incredible business, and inspiring other people to do the same. Because a lot of women I work with, they change their relationship with alcohol, and they get so passionate about this topic and helping people feel fulfilled as well. And so they want to help other people. So in my certification program, we now certify coaches, so they're going out into the world to do, similar things. Because like when you solve a problem in your own life, or you overcome a challenge, or you find fulfillment, like it feels so good. You want to turn around and help the person behind you. And I think that's another big thing that's often missing in our workforce, is just a feeling of fulfillment and contribution. Like you're making the world a better place. And I think that's really important. Most of us are, especially in our generation and younger, like we are heart-centered. We want to know our work matters. And if we can't see that it matters, it feels meaningless, essentially. And I would say before I became an entrepreneur, I had a pretty good job, in the sense that like I had great work-life balance. I got to travel. I worked on interesting projects. It was in the nonprofit education sector, so it didn't pay the best, but it was still like a pretty good job. But I was missing that piece. I was really missing how I'm making a fundamental difference on this planet. It just felt like I was kind of like saying the corporate platitudes. Like, yeah, we like corporate social responsibility, but like I couldn't feel the impact. And I think when you're doing something where you actually feel like you're making a difference, you feel fulfilled almost every single day.
Right. And in order for people to, let's say they want to become an entrepreneur, I fully encourage people to do a lot of inner work before they jump down that path. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. It's not necessarily an easier path. Like, I think it is an easier path as long as you have done the foundational work, right? So like in your in your case, you had to get rid of alcohol, you had to take a break, you had to sit with those emotions, you had to really deal with the stuff that needed to be dealt with before you could springboard to the place where you are now, where you're able to help other people and empower them and inspire them. And it's like for everybody else, step one, ditch alcohol, like get rid of the numbing solution, whatever that may be for you, deal with your chiz, and then you're able to really focus and be like, okay, let's go. Like hit the ground running. I'm ready.
Yeah. I think that entrepreneurship is like the biggest personal development growth journey you're ever going to go on. And so if you are feeling that like you lack stimulation, or you feel boredom, or you feel like you're up for like a challenge, I think it's really beautiful. And I will say why it's hard. I think that what I actually do on any given day is I type, I talk, and like, that's it. Like literally that's it. I type and I talk. So like what I'm actually doing is by no means hard. Like there are people on this planet who have really hard jobs, Yes. So if I think about it in that sense, like, no, it's not hard at all. But what happens with entrepreneurship is it can be emotionally hard because we take meaning in every little thing that happens. Someone wrote a negative email or a rude email. Someone commented here, this thing happened, this sale didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And we like our emotions go up and down like this roller coaster because we attach our meaning and our worth to every single thing that happens.
Yes.
And there's this really cool entrepreneur I love named James Wedmore. And he says, your business grows depending on how many problems you can handle without you going so crazy that there's a problem, right? Like just being like, it's okay. It's supposed to have problems. This is a business. This is normal, right? And not going on this crazy, kind of roller coaster. So I've definitely learned in like my 6 years as an entrepreneur, there's days when I'm definitely having stuff affect me, but a lot of things that used to affect me now don't, right? So it's kind of like I've graduated to new levels and new problems, and I'm going to probably be graduating for the rest of my life into new levels, you know what I mean? But it's that if you can have emotional equanimity, which is like you learn to find your calm, your peace, your groundedness, and not get so attached to these things, like something that was maybe like bothering me in my business, like one day, I don't even remember it the next week. You know what I mean? Because it's like new set of problems, new set of opportunities and stuff like that. And I actually think that that's really exciting because like you get to grow so much as a person. You really do. From learning how to market better to learn how to do your own like healing, like even things like your health and your spirituality really matter as a business owner because your business will never grow like bigger than the owner's development. Like it's just not possible. You know what I mean? So everything you do for yourself, for your healing, for your personal development, for your growth, anything you're doing that gets you outside of your comfort zone, plus all the strategy, the marketing, the, operations, finances, all that stuff you're doing, you just like, you're growing. Like every year, you're a totally different person. So if like growth is really exciting for you, there's no better career for sure than entrepreneurship. And like, if that sense of like knowing that, every single challenge you overcome, every single thing you figure out, if it just makes you feel super proud of yourself, like there's just so much, like I'm obsessed with it. I go to sleep every night just trying to solve like little issues or problems or think of new opportunities. Like it's a never ending stimulation journey for me, I guess you could say. And I think that's what I was really missing in my previous career, which was easier because I just kind of, like it just wasn't as much, if you could say. And I know people have really stressful careers too, but that's what happens when you're in something that has a lot of challenges, but you're not actually passionate about it or aligned with it. You could care less about the problems, right? So then it's just super stressful for you. So I think it's really important to find what challenge you really want to sign up for in your life, the one you love or the one you could care less about.
That's so interesting. I never thought about stress as like the disconnect between you actually working on it, but it's not connected to you. Like there's no like heart connection there. And that's why it's providing stress. I think that's really poignant and like really important for people to hear because I know that there's going to be somebody listening to this who's like, oh my God, I really relate to what you talk about because growth is like the biggest thing in my life. It's like what I care about. It's like, it's the kind of people I surround myself with. Like it really permeates every aspect of my life. And that's how I knew that like there was no way I was going to be sustainable for me to stay in like a typical 9-to-5 job because my growth is dependent on whether somebody else says it's okay or not. Like I can't have that where my like ability to, maybe like level up or move up or grow in a role determined by like my manager. I set my own limits. You know what I'm saying? And like, I can't, that's for me. I was like, I can't do it. There's no way that that's going to work for me long term.
Or like a dumb piece of paper, like your resume is supposed to have all your worth captured on that, you know? And it's just like,
and it's supposed to fit in this nice little box on one page, and it can't be more than this. And like, there's just, that's a whole other can of worms that we could get into. But yeah, I mean, your growth is truly like your own limit. You set the limits, and when you realize that you don't have to set limits, it's a whole other game.
Yeah. And I think like the way I used to believe, and but with so many of my clients just didn't believe that was true, you know? And until like when they got just this empowering journey when they ditched alcohol, it was like, oh, why couldn't I do this? Why couldn't I do that? Like there's just so much self-empowerment that happens. So any kind of journey you're on where you can like really deepen your self-belief and what you think is possible is going to be so important for your future. Like, because if you don't think things are possible and you don't really believe in yourself, it's almost like you're going to be blind to the opportunities. Like you just won't see them, you know, like you really will act differently based on your feelings. And I think that's where like some people, I love the law of attraction and all things manifestation, but for some people who think it's like a little too woo or just like not scientifically accurate, it's like, well, you literally, if you're thinking negatively, you will close your eyes to opportunities and you will not take proper action. And if you are in a very positive frame of mind and you believe things are possible and all that kind of stuff, you're going to act differently. So the results are going to be different person to person like that. Which is like my like skeptics version of like how to see like manifestation really does work, you know? And it's made the biggest difference. I think that if we know that alcohol actually lowers the human mood, if it actually lowers our ability to feel joy and brings up all this anxiety and sadness, like removing it to me is just step one, crystal clear on how to manifest your dream life much closer.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, I mean, that's the best way to say it. And I think that's the perfect place to close for today. That is incredible. This was such a fulfilling and exciting conversation. I truly enjoyed it. I think these are some really important things that need to be said, and I'm really excited to share this episode with everyone because I think it's so important.
Amazing. Well, it's such an honor to be on your show today.